shattering loss, and they were stunned, and they didn't know what to do or where to go. But they did know that they wanted to do one thing. They had the energy and drive and motivation to do one thing. And that was to do whatever they could so that other families, whether they are in a suburb or a township or a city, would not have to go through the kind of pain and loss that they had. That was an enormous and very solemn position to be in, to be asked by these families. It was an obligation, but it was also an enormous privilege. And my answer was, I don't know. Now, I didn't know anything about guns or gun law. I didn't even heard of this immunity. But I knew enough to never tell a client, oh yeah, we got this, no problem. And I also thought, wow, this is going to be an enormous effort. And then I thought, how can we not try? And actually, a lot of this was through the help of my dad, who passed away during this time, because he was always about that. We knew we had to start somewhere in terms of looking. To answer the question about what they could do, first we had to figure out where to start. Where do you start? We knew it was partly about learning about the issues and doing our homework about the facts of the case. Because I didn't know there was an immunity law, I figured it was just general tort law, which we do every day, and that we could apply our collective creativity to figure out a way. I didn't know there were extra protections for this particular industry. So we had to do our homework on the facts, and we had to get to know the families, I thought. So, and I will admit that when I saw the weapon, and it is a weapon, it's not a firearm, it's not a modern sporting rifle, it's not a family Swiss Army knife, it's a combat weapon. It's a combat weapon. And when I saw it, I didn't know it was a combat weapon at the time. I just thought, what is that thing? I've never seen anything like it. So I figured I better do my homework and learn about it. We all did. And this is before we filed a lawsuit, of course, because you can't file a lawsuit unless you are confident that you have a plausible, at least a plausible case. That is our obligation as officers of the court. So here's what you need to know about the AR-15 combat rifle. We had a document that is actually publicly available. And of course, I knew this was going to happen because it always does. But we had a document that really answered the question about what this is and what it isn't. And I'm showing you the document because if anybody tries to tell you the commercial AR-15 is not much more dangerous than a toaster or any other weapon even or firearm, you should have this at your disposal because this is the most independent, objective, and chilling evidence of what an AR-15 is. The Department of Defense document. Oh, yelling. So the Department of Defense did the goal of the military is to protect us, right? It's to preserve our freedoms abroad in battlefields and streets and jungles so that we can enjoy them, all of us can enjoy them. People who love guns and people who hate guns, and everybody in between can enjoy those freedoms here at home and can enjoy our way of life. And we are so fortunate to have a military that will fight and even die to protect those freedoms. And when it came to the military looking for the best weapon, the most lethal weapon, the most destructive weapon, and the weapon that could provide our soldiers, should they be forced to shoot and kill the enemies of our country and of our freedom, they chose the AR-15. They chose it. The greatest military in the world, which could have had any weapon, chose the AR-15. And they didn't only choose it, because the military is not going to invest millions of dollars into anybody who designs a weapon. The weapon is just a feat of technology coming out of the Armalite company. It's not, and it's a feat of technology, and there was a lot of competition here. But the military is not going to just go with it and give all our soldiers who are fighting to preserve our freedoms here any old weapon. So they tested it. They field tested it. And they tested it against notorious weapons, including the Thompson submachine gun, the Tommy gun, a weapon so dangerous that in 1934 was effectively outlawed. And you know who led the charge in that outlaw? The NRA. The NRA. And it was outlawed because gangsters like Pretty Boy Floyd and Al Capone were committing massacres in the streets. So everybody got together, even the gun industry. But they turned to the NRA to help ban, essentially, the idea was they wanted to ban the weapon, but they were worried they couldn't because of certain legal interpretations. So what they did is that wasn't PLACA. But what they did was they just taxed it into oblivion. So they made it absolutely unaffordable. And eventually it was banned, essentially the fully automatic weapons were banned. But the AR-15 is so lethal and deadly that it absolutely crushed the Tommy gun in these field tests essentially in Vietnam. That is how lethal it is. And the mainstay of the AR-15 is semi-automatic fire. There have been different versions that allow you to switch to automatic fire fully, then to something called burst fire, which allows for 3 rounds at a time to be discharged with one pull of the trigger. But in the field of battle, when our soldiers are laying their lives on the line, semi-automatic fire is almost universally preferred. And while they've gotten rid of they've switched from fully automatic to burst fire, it's still the mainstay is semi-automatic fire. So do not let anybody say, well, it's not a military weapon because it doesn't have a selector switch. It would be less lethal a weapon, probably, if it were fully automatic and not semi-automatic. All right, so I've made my point. This is a very detailed report. You can see it. I thought this was an anchoring, this enlightened, taught me about what the weapon was by the most independent, most reliable, and most objective source, our Department of Defense. And here it is being used. It's probably an M4. You see that's the AR-15 platform. That's recently in Afghanistan, probably. Couldn't swear to it, but it was from the jungles of Iraq to the streets of Fallujah. And right now, guess what? There are Ukrainian soldiers bunkered down, waiting for the world's second most powerful nation, and they are armed with AR-15s, Ukrainian version. All right. Now, we also knew we had to learn about the families, a little bit about the families. And so there are some freedoms. Why do people lay it on the line? Because there are freedoms worth fighting for and protecting, even if they're life-threatening situations on battlefields abroad. So I want to take just a glimpse to the families, not these families who I love, but the people I never knew. And because they deserve to stand here and say, you know what? I got robbed. I got robbed. So let's go to just this. Where's this? This is Vicky Soto, okay? Obviously, her most elegant picture. Vicky was the oldest sister of Jillian and Carly and Matthew. And she was, you can see why a first grader might kind of want to be in her good graces and enjoy going to school. And on December 14, 2012, Vicky was all holiday spirit. She was, in fact, she was standing in the kitchen of their home where they all shared, right? And Donna, her mom's a nurse, and Vicky was already fully dressed with an outfit that she thought the kids would love, and that included boots with relatively, I don't know if they're high heels. They always explain to me as 2-inch heels. But what Vicky did, because Carly, her younger sister, was in high school and sleeping in the basement, what Vicky did was she made sure when she came down at 6 a.m. to stomp on the floor, because she knew it would shatter, Carly awake, and that was very pleasing to Vicky. And there she was in the pitch black. She lived in Stratford, so she had a long drive to the school, but she was always getting up in the dark and coming home in the dark. And she was really, really excited because the kids were making gingerbread cookies in her classroom. Very excited. This was all Vicky, and she had set it up like a perfect. Everybody had a schedule to come in because she didn't want all the kids and all the parents at the same time making gingerbread cookies. And that was Vicky. And we know, because of what was blasting in the car that was picked up later, that all the way from Stratford to Sandy Hook, Vicky was blasting Michael Bublé's Christmas carols. Christmas Carol. I never heard him, but apparently it was pretty loud. So that was what life, that's just a snapshot of what life looked like for one person, Vicky Soto. This is Lauren Rousseau. Lauren was sort of on her way. She was a hard worker, a hustler, somebody who didn't spend a lot of idle time sitting around and complaining about things. She was a hard worker trying to get through life early on, and she was trying to realize her I say trying to get through life. Her whole life was ahead of her. I don't mean it's like she was looking back. She was trying to find a job as a teacher because that was her lifelong dream, and she was also working at Starbucks at the same time. So on this day, she was called in as a substitute, which of course was great, because the normal teacher that would have been there that Friday had an appointment for an ultrasound for who was pregnant. And so so Lauren said, "Oh, I'll take that." And she was super excited because that night she was going to see The Hobbit with her boyfriend. And they even made Hobbit cookies the night before. That's what was going on in Lauren's life. This is Rachel Davino. Rachel was the forever student, right? Did she ever not go? Was she ever going to stop going to school? Rachel had just finished 2 days before her ABA, which is an Applied Behavioral Analysis certificate, and she was laying the foundation to ultimately get her doctorate. And she was so excited about the prospects of her future career. And she did something really I haven't heard of. I don't think I ever heard of anybody doing this. I've read about them. But she, on 2 days before, on the Wednesday before the 14th, she made a time capsule. And in the time capsule, and she did it with a friend, she wrote the following. "It is my dream that you know my name as a leader in behavioral analysis for children and adults with autism. However, I will be thrilled if I make a few people have an easier, more enjoyable life." And that's what the world looked like to Rachel on that morning. And this is Mary. Bill, you here? Bill's wife of a long time. I don't want to embarrass him. Bill was standing in Bill was standing at a Christmas party in upstate New York, about in the 76, I think, 1976, and he was talking to a friend named John, and Bill, all of a sudden, this gorgeous woman walked in, and both young, and Bill was very distracted by what John was talking about, and he said, "Who's that? You know her?" And John turned around and goes, "Oh yeah, that's Mary Green. Forget about it. You got no chance." And there was Bill, 36 years and 3 days later, standing with his wife, Mary Sherlock, on his way to work, giving her a hug and a kiss. And Mary, by that time, had become a school psychologist. Oh, and then he left for work. That's what normal, everyday thing. And they were going to see each other anyway because she was taking a half day, and they were going to go up to Essex to visit some friends. And anyway, Mary was a school psychologist, and she just. It was all about the kids for her. And during her 18-year career, she had seen kids with all kinds of problems, developmental delays, getting bullied, all the types of things that happen in elementary school, and she loved it. And she was getting herself ready, I think that's been explained to me, to get into that next phase of her life, which was to become a grandmother. They had 2 daughters, and she was sort of trying not to pressure them, but biding her time. She was going to work another year at Sandy Hook, unless one of her daughters unless she had a granddaughter, whichever came first, she would probably have left Sandy Hook earlier so that she could jump into her role as a grandmother. And unfortunately, of course, she lost that opportunity. And but Bill didn't. So do granddaughters. This is Jesse Lewis. Jesse Lewis was, Jesse Lewis, I think of him as kind of a Renaissance man. Maybe he doesn't look it in this picture. He looks like somebody you wouldn't want to be the goalie against at that age. But Jesse Lewis was a painter. Jesse Lewis was a fisherman. Jesse Lewis was an athlete. He loved animals. He helped his dad build Neil with repairs of trucks. And the night before, on the Thursday, but night before the 14th, Jesse Lewis and his dad went to pick out Christmas ornaments so that he could buy an ornament for his favorite teacher, Mrs. Soto. And also, then they went to Walmart, where Jesse pointed to all of the toys that he wanted. And they were Nerf guns, they were toy soldiers, everything military. Jesse loved the military, and he loved playing soldier. And the next day, it was a great day, because Fridays always were between Jesse and Neil, because they always went to a diner, and Jesse could always get his sausage and eggs. And it was his favorite breakfast, just to give it was the Misty Vale Diner. This is Dylan. Dylan, the morning of 12/14/12 started out with a major breakthrough for Dylan and his mom, Nicole. Dylan lived with Nicole and his dad Ian and his older brother Jake. And Dylan was a child with autism. And one of the things that his parents had been struggling with him on was his diet, which, let's just say, it was not a varied diet. And he had been refusing to eat anything but Cheerios with no milk for breakfast. Yeah, horrifying. And you could see why his mom, Nicole, was anxious to get him some nutrition. So for weeks, Nicole had been trying to get liquid vitamins down him, to have him take liquid vitamins through a dropper, and he was holding the line pretty firmly. But on that morning, she succeeded. And she felt good about it, and no doubt he felt good about it. It was a breakthrough. There's something that happened towards the end that is too heartbreaking to read. And I'm sorry, I just don't think I can read it. Noah this is Noah this is on Wednesday. Noah was lighting the candles for the Jewish holidays. And he was excited about it. That's like a rite of passage for anybody to hold a candle that's actually on fire. And this is a photo taken by his dad, Lenny. Lenny and Veronique, his mother, were separated but co-parenting. And this was on a Wednesday, and when Veronique went to the house to deliver some food and other things for Noah, he brought her right over to the candles, and he said, "Guess what I did? Guess what I did? I lit the candles." And he was so proud. And the next day, then Veronique left. It's the last time she saw him. The next day on the way, Noah has a twin sister who was also at the Sandy Hook School, and also an older sister, Sophia. And the next day, it was Lenny's turn to drive them to Sandy Hook, and it was about a 20-minute drive. And the whole drive, they had Len in the front seat. He had 3 really small kids in the back. Noah, his twin sister, his older sister, who was really only 8, but she was technically older. And they were blasting Gangnam Style, which was a song that was very popular at the time. It was like a viral song. And every time the song ended, the kids would scream, "Play it again, play it again." And Len remembers very vividly the excitement and sort of disorganization of Noah bounding out on his way to school. A kid, he describes him as having a backpack on one shoulder. His coat was draped kind of sloppily over the other, and he was sort of a hot mess at the time. And that was his memory of dropping off Noah. And then there is Daniel Barton. What can I say about Daniel Barton? That picture doesn't say. So I'm going to next person. Daniel was a energetic, creative, social, and lovely child, and I never even met him. but on this morning, it was again. There were little things that happened this morning that were a little different for everybody. But on this morning, Daniel got up super early, and he trailed his older brother, who he admired, out the door, and was sort of like shuffling. And by the way, his older brother's name is James. And he followed James down the driveway, his little flip-flops and his pajamas. And they heard a pitter-patter, and Mark was with James. They turned around to, "Daniel, what are you doing up?" And then Mark, who's a musician, sat down with Daniel and started teaching him Jingle Bells. Daniel Daniel was pretty, I don't know if this is unusual for him, but he was very prepared for the holidays. He had written Santa a letter, and I'll just read it to you. It's not long. It said, "Dear Santa, I just hope you can let me see you with your reindeer. Merry Christmas." And then he added, "Please write back. I love you, Daniel." This is not funny. This is not funny. This problem we have is just not funny. This is Benjamin Wheeler. Things were a little hectic in the Wheeler household. Apparently, Francine, Benjamin's mom, and David, Francine's dad, had swapped cars the day before because I don't want to get into a marital issue here, Spat, but basically, let's move on. But basically, David was frantically trying to go to work. He couldn't find his keys, so he got into Francine's car and he drove off. Unbeknownst to David was Benjamin's backpack in the back seat. And any parent knows that when a kid can't find his backpack, there is no worse thing that can happen. And so Francine, Benjamin's mother, sprung to action with her wonderful instincts and lovely instincts, and she knew she had to cheer up Benjamin. So after they dropped off Benjamin's idol and older brother, Nate, at school. Francine offered Benjamin what was, in my mind, a pretty obvious choice. Benjamin, you could either go home and wait for the bus, or you can come to Starbucks with me and get some hot chocolate. That's the essence of a no-brainer for a 6-year-old. And so they were sitting at Starbucks, and Benjamin sort of calmed down, and all of a sudden Benjamin said, do you know what I'm going to be when I grow up? An architect. And then he kept talking, as he was wont to do, and said, but I might also want to be a paleontologist like Nate wants to be. And Francine looked at Benjamin, and she said, Benjamin, you don't always have to do what Nate does. And of course, Benjamin said, wrong, basically. I'm always going to be with Nate. I love Nate, and I love you. And then Francine was, I'm sure, warmed her heart. She said, I love you too. And then Ben said, can I borrow your iPhone? Such a kid thing to do, isn't it? He wanted to play a game on the iPhone. And after Starbucks, Francine drove Benjamin to the school, and her last words to him were, close the door. In about 5 minutes, an AR-15, a combat weapon, this is the AR-15 on the floor of the first grade classroom, was used not by a highly trained soldier, but by a deeply troubled kid. Not on a battlefield abroad, but in an elementary school at home. And not to preserve freedoms, but to eviscerate them. When we can take this out. When we first looked into the case, we thought it was really about the gun. And the gun is it has a role here. But there was a chilling part to what we learned that was comparable to this. And that was about greed. It was about greed. We always thought I thought the case was really about the gun, but it's just as much about greed. Once the AR-15 was adopted by the military, it was available to the civilian population. For decades, you could get an AR-15. For decades. But the market was kind of small. It was a very niche market. Why was the market small for an AR-15? Because nobody really felt they wanted one or needed one. Nobody had their identity caught up in whether they held an AR-15. Nobody was so fragile that they needed an AR-15 combat weapon to prove something. And a lot of people just didn't know enough or care enough to see if they could get one. However, there was a market of responsible people, a market of specialists, a market of people who knew what an AR-15 was and knew what the responsibility was of owning an AR-15. These were people maybe like target hunters or people on gun ranges, those kinds of things. For about 40 years, the market was small. In fact, Remington, which is an iconic American company, which I can, with some pride, real pride, talking about old Remington now, can say has deep roots here in Connecticut. There's a Remington factory in Bridgeport that was very integral in the Remington brand. And for decades, Remington didn't sell an AR-15. In fact, when the DuPonts owned Remington, they didn't even sell handguns. They were content to carry on the tradition, the proud tradition of the country, which is very much part of who we are, of hunting, right? So the Remington was all about that tradition, safety, and they were, of course, they were interested in profit. But you know what they cared about just as much as profit? They cared about people, starting with their own people, their employees. They were good to their employees. They wouldn't fire somebody who had been working there for 30 years simply because that person had a big salary and was starting to lose efficiency. And they were responsible. Remington was a very responsible company. What Remington proved is that you can be in the gun industry and be profitable and also be responsible. That's what they proved in almost 200 years, until they were taken over by Cerberus, which is a private equity firm in Midtown Manhattan. Greed kills. When the idea of private equity money going into the gun industry was novel, was creative, and turned out to be, for a while anyway, extremely successful. Extremely successful. It was, if you could take away everything else about it, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. The minds at this private equity firm looked at the landscape of the gun industry, and they didn't see big Fortune 500 company here, big Fortune 500 company there. This wasn't the oil industry where you have, my friend, I have somebody who knows more about this, but like that, you have like all these different publicly traded companies. These were all small, privately owned niche companies, some of which were like Remington, built from the ground up by somebody who had skin in the game, who was proud of their product and good to their workers and responsible. People like the Bushmaster founder, Richard Dyke, who had built Bushmaster. And Bushmaster was a company that was selling and specialized in AR-15s. They were one of 5 or 6 companies, small companies, that made AR-15s at the time that this private equity firm got involved. And what private equity does, for those of you who didn't know, I didn't know it's going to be a lesson in private equity and guns and gun. I mean, it was, but you go where the evidence takes you. And what private equity does is they look for these opportunities to take all these small little component parts and they roll them up, right? So instead of having 5 marketing departments, that you have 1. Instead of having 5 manufacturing plants, you have 1. You know, the obvious implications of that is you could do more with less and more effectively and spend less. And that's what they did. And the private equity firm, unlike Remington and Sons, which was built to provide value and something built by hand, and built in America, actually, also their hunting rifles, and was passed on in the family and to people who were treated like family. The private equity goal here was unabashedly, there was only one goal. Let's turn this gun, let's build a gun conglomerate and turn it into a $1 billion a year massive behemoth gun company. And that was pretty much unheard of. Even the publicly traded companies were probably not the size of that goal was set to meet. And when you're building a market, marketing was also a big part of this case. We're moving on, in essence, from the gun to these other principles of fair dealing, these principles of responsibility. And while you could say that some gun companies don't have, with some argument that the gun companies don't show a lot of responsibility, what about the private equity firms that take homegrown operations and they strip them of all their personality in the effort to make money? And so when these two things collided with Cerberus in about 2005, roughly, when this was all brewing, there were about 100,000 AR-15s sold in America. In 2012, the year of the Sandy Hook, there were over 2 million. There were over 2 million. What an incredible accomplishment. How do you take, I mean, first of all, it's hard enough to make a new product and tell people they need it, they should want it, that they are not, that there's some attraction to it that's going to cause them to want the weapon, in this case a weapon. But how do you take a product that's just been sitting there and do that? That's masterful. That's masterful. And they did it in a very smart way. First, they knew they had a built-in customer base of gun owners, because gun owners are whatever the stat is, 40% of people who own guns, something like that. Don't quote me on that. But they had an established customer base. But obviously, those customers hadn't been enticed to buy an AR-15, because their natural instincts would be, why do I need that? I've got my hunting rifle. I've got my home defense, gun or shotgun. I don't need I don't need to play military in my neighborhood. Why do I need that? So that was one of their target. But if you could convince them to buy one, what a boon that would be, considering, just do the numbers, it's all math. And then their second goal was to try to find a market that had not been exposed to guns yet. Not the older, established gun purchaser, but a new market of young people who had never owned a weapon. They call this in marketing targeting an end user. Targeting an end user. This is what I learned. And targeting an end user, somebody explained it to me like this. Our kids probably, if you have kids, somewhere along the lines, they were interested, we wanted something from the Disney Corporation. The Disney Corporation is not targeting us, right? They're targeting our kids. We are the purchaser, but we're just the vessel that delivers the money to Disney. We are being pushed by our kids, and we want to do our kids, we try, within some moderation, but you get the picture. They target the end user, and they were very specific about targeting this market. And how do you target people who have never owned a weapon? You have to convince them they need it. The younger male demographic, tap into their anxieties about masculinity. Tap into their feelings of aggrievement or insecurity. Maybe you're tapping into their lack of being physically strong. Tell them that this weapon conveys power and masculinity. You bet, you know what, if somebody had offered me something that conveyed power and masculinity, even today I would take it. But back then I would definitely take it. I would take that in a heartbeat. I would take it in a heartbeat. And I bet you all know people like this who would grab that opportunity. And they did it in many different ways. Very clever, very orchestrated. So let's show the old Bushmaster. First of all, they had rolled up Bushmaster. One of the problems is they had 4 companies that were all selling AR-15s. Or 3 of them were. So anyway, this is an old-fashioned Bushmaster marketing. Now, if a troubled young person who probably shouldn't have a weapon in their hands looks at this, no problem. This ain't a sale, right? But what about the responsible gun owner that we always hear about? That apparently is the iconic gun owner that the industry is seeking. Well, the responsible gun owner could say, I want an AR-15, look at these specifications, and this is how the engagement happened, right? This is Bushmaster before the acquisition. And this is going to be, you're not going to get the off the chart sales that they were looking for to make their $1 billion. But you are going to get a customer who has a desire, a natural desire for a weapon, and has the inclination to get it. Next. Here's what they did one of the things they did, because they were capitalizing on the ability to reach directly around the parents into the bedrooms of children and teenagers and young adults, and they knew it. They knew it. We know they know it. We know they know it. And all they were really doing, in fairness, was using the modern means of communication to reach a target audience. So these are just examples of banners they used. Jeff stayed at home to watch Mamma Mia with his fiancée instead of coming to poker night with the boys. And Jeff is a crier. And what they would do with this particular man card campaign is you could also, I don't think we have it on here, but you could also report somebody. So if somebody was not a, a man, you could turn in your friends and say this, and then you would enter their email addresses, and no doubt you would get you'd plant their email, and then you would be delivering to Bushmaster, which was one of the brands of this conglomeration that became Remington. They would have that person's email in it for marketing purposes. You could report your friend for not being a man because they don't own a book. And Bushmaster wanted to know that because now they're like, okay, think about that for a second. You've been reported by your friend. Maybe you're not somebody who would normally want to be interested in a weapon like this, but your friend has just turned you in. He thinks you're a wimp, and you see your lifeline to masculinity. It was actually really smart, wasn't it? It was really smart. Take away everything else, it was really smart. All right. And then everybody's seen this. This is with the payoff that you would get. And it's a good thing all these families are sitting down. The thing is that Cerberus, who was sort of the oversight, but it was really through a holding company called Freedom Group, which became Remington. Forget unnecessary complications. But what they did was they were so successful at sort of raising this product from the ashes, and the sales were going through the roof. And what happens it's like when you see the stock, when somebody sees a stock going up, they want to be part of it. They want to rush in, right? And that's exactly what happened. All of their competitors were saying, hey, you know that dusty old AR-15 that nobody wanted? It's a cash cow. It's a cash cow. And we know this. We know this because you can see it in the sales charts. Because this is an industry that tracks what each other's doing like no other industry. Everybody knows everybody else's business. And they sort of look over. And so, for example, Smith & Wesson, seeing this explosion in sales, which was also very much the product of the stoking of the fear of President Obama taking everybody's guns. Smith & Wesson, which was one of the competitors of this gun conglomerate, who had also never sold an AR-15, got into the AR-15 game. And just I think it's appropriate just to say, and we all know that a Smith & Wesson product was used, an AR-15, by another troubled young man in Parkland. And it is likely that Smith & Wesson never would have made an AR-15 to market to kids or young adults like this, had this effort not been so successful. But think about what happens, the basic supply and demand. Think about what happens now. Everybody's rushing in. There had been about 6 or 7 before Cerberus started, companies that were making AR-15s before, all very small. By 2009 and 10, there were like 31 companies making AR-15s. Now, what happens when you have this onslaught of supply, and the president that you were saying was going to take away everybody's guns doesn't? Then you have a problem with demand. And how do you start out, now that all these players have rushed in, by distinguishing your product, your brand, from the others? Marketing. Marketing. It's the only way. You know why? All AR-15s function the same. They all function the same. I'm sure you get somebody to say, well, the guy doesn't know what he's talking about. This one has this thing. They are all functionally equivalent. So the only way to distinguish it is with marketing and branding. And with the intense competition, they had to take that next step. They had to cash in on their, Bushmaster in particular was the brand associated with things that are not legal, for example, like combat, for civilians. Combat is not a legal thing to engage in with a AR-15 in our streets and neighborhoods. Assaultive kind of things, and all these slogans. And they will tell you this is made for hunting, but where's the animal? Where's the animal in this? They will tell you it's made for target shooting. Really? They will tell you it has all these different things that it doesn't have, and that's why nobody bought this product except for a small niche of people, because they knew what the weapon was for, and whatever that purpose was, it wasn't any of those things. And but to distinguish, so what they did was again, another brilliant idea. They started a sister kind of product called the Adaptive Combat Rifle, and to distinguish the Bushmaster brand. And if you're going to buy, branding is important, because if I'm going to buy, to use our friend Dylan's favorite cereals, Cheerios, and there's a Honey Nut Cheerios, I'm in, right? So the Honey Nut Cheerios branding is working on me to buy Cheerios. The regular Cheerios is cross-branding. So the Bushmaster brand was carving out this niche market. And so they upped the ante. So that's another Bushmaster ad. I will just point out that's a lone gunman. That's a lone gunman, and this is, and so getting this type of thing out to the commercial market is just, it just is what it is. You can see it. It's in plain sight, and this is what, in furtherance of their branding. So, but to distinguish themselves on the ACR, they went the next level. First of all, they developed something. First of all, it's called an adaptive combat rifle. To your friends and neighbors, they will sell you an adaptive combat rifle. Just stop right there and think about that. First of all, why would they? And look at the messaging: clear the room, cover the rooftop, rescue the hostage. Do I even need to put out the man card that is conferred? They're not selling, this is not marketing to the military. The military doesn't need man cards. They don't need man cards. And the executives at this organization would refer to the people who they were targeting with Bushmaster and their sister DPMS as wannabes. And if you think about the implications of clearing the room, I mean, what message could they possibly sending that is lawful? What message? Forces of opposition bow down. You have been single-handedly outnumbered. It is true that during this marketing and this effort to make $1 billion, largely on the backs of the AR-15 and military combat weapons, there had not been as many school shootings, of course, as there are today. However, wasn't everybody around at Columbine? Wasn't everybody around at Virginia Tech? Why would you make a weapon to have people force oppositions bow down if that could happen? And why would you market it to the target audience they were marketing it to if you were a responsible company, let alone Remington never did this with their hunting rifles. And this is a little bit of I would say it's the sort of the pièce de resistance. What was that? Pièce de resistance. Remington got really lucky having developed an association with Activision in the enormously successful Call of Duty franchise. And this was one of those modern ways to market a weapon to circumvent the traditional barriers of children that you would have with children, because children aren't going to march into a gun store and order a gun magazine, right? And teenagers, I would say. But this is a way to reach underage people as well as lawfully aged people with marketing, and it's so effective. It's so effective. And actually, there were naysayers at Remington who said, I don't know. They were amazed. They were amazed at how lifelike this was. And there was one comment that was made was, you know, we used to have to get people out to the gun range to show that our weapons had little recoil. You don't need to do that anymore. And when a 12-year-old made a replica of a functioning ACR, this is, anyway, when a family, this is my hook, I guess I'm getting, but when everybody was like, yay. But when the families, they saw the pay dirt, they saw the pay dirt in this. And they feature, of course, there's no controlling what message this reaches. And they understood that people who playing the game who would experience this rifle would then go online to look at the product. And that's by their own admission, essentially. Okay. So that's enough of a background, but so many, we hear about these things, and we think of them out theoretically, like what is the weapon, what does the market have to do it. It really doesn't, until you see the whole picture, for me at least, it didn't really add up. And that's when I realized that we had a problem with greed and irresponsibility going all around in this case. If this wasn't the gun industry, but literally any other industry, nobody would have sort of batted an eyelash when we filed this lawsuit on behalf of these wonderful families. Nobody, because you would have said, of course the people who were pushing this should be held accountable, or at least of course you should have the right to investigate and look into whether, you know, the conduct, as we all do. This is the great equalizer. And I was thinking, yeah, of course. And then somebody pointed out to me that there was actually a law that was different for the gun industry than anybody else. So after finally feeling some comfort about, you know, I'm not just going to be me and all my colleagues, because this is, if ever there was a team effort, it's been this one, but that we had a legal problem here. That we're practicing lawyers, have been around for a while. We were practicing in 2005. None of us had ever heard of this law. But apparently in 2005, the NRA went to Congress and basically asked Congress for a favor. They said they wanted protections where people were injured or killed by their guns, even if the industry or the company did something wrong. They wanted special protections. And of course, our whole judicial system has developed over a long period of time to create a balance between the rights of individuals and the rights of companies, as it should be. And it's worked out, right? So we all know that this is important, to hold corporations accountable, and that also creates better conduct. And when Congress was asked to choose between the ordinary rights of families have to pursue just cases and hold industries accountable on the one hand, and the bottom line of the gun industry on the other, Congress, which could have said no, they could have said let the regular rules apply, Congress put its thumb on the bottom line of the gun industry. And of course, that made the industry very happy. But it did something worse. It gave the industry a perception that nothing they did could ever be evaluated. Nothing that they did could ever be subject to scrutiny. Nothing they did could ever lead to liability. And that made gun companies a very nice, tidy partnership for insurance companies. What's better for an insurance company than collecting a premium that you don't think you have to pay out on? And what is more dangerous than any industry believing that they can do whatever they want if profit is the only motive? That they have no skin in the game, no responsibility to families of people injured. The laws don't apply to them. And that perception, I think, is the worst thing about PLACA that was done. We met some really good people who were in the gun industry. I liked them. I saw fathers and grandfathers. Even the executives that I would be prone not, whatever, I would have had a sort of a hesitancy. I saw human beings. But when human beings are gathered together simply to make profit, and they don't believe that they can be held responsible for anything, bad things happen. And that's what happened. And today we're here, believe it or not, after that, to report a settlement in this case. A settlement in this case, which, I'll be honest, I'm not sure I always, I had some cold feet going into the case, which is not for today's purposes, but here we are, but even, but we, during the odyssey that this case has been in, we established what was clearly true, which is that PLCAA is a barrier, but PLCAA is not bulletproof. The immunity protecting the gun industry is not bulletproof. And if anything comes out of this case, and the families pray and hope that it will, it's to have what happened to them happen to other people is just too shattering. But if anything that will do that, I think it's that it has shattered that perception. And the gun industry, we hope the gun industry takes this under advisement. We hope they realize that they have skin into the game. Instead of blaming literally everybody else, school systems for not having security to defend against their weapons, mentally disabled people like Dylan Hockley, and law enforcement that doesn't do a good enough job protecting us from their products, and basically literally everybody else. We are just, the ask here is very humble. What can you do? What can you do? How can you help? How can you help fix this? Everybody else is trying. There was hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, invested in school security. The schools are trying. It's time to stop, saddling everything on mentally ill people as if there is one mentally ill person and that's the same as every other mentally ill person.
And we are going to take a quick 2-minute break here for some of you on Live Now from Fox, everyone.
That's easy. That's what a friend of mine would say, sleeves off the vest. It's such low-hanging, and it's not a new law. You're in charge of that. Do it. Do it tomorrow, and tell us about it. The families would be so heartened to hear that. That's a first step, but not a last. And insurance companies, it's time for you to start treating gun industry like you treat me every time I get a speeding ticket. You're all over me. You raise my rates. You send me to class. That doesn't happen, but theoretically. Where's the oversight? Have you ever heard of an insurance company standing behind an insured that has no care whatsoever for the risk they're creating? And not only that increases the risk of things going bad? Where's the oversight? This can be done. This can be done. This is not the end of times for the gun industry. The gun industry will always be part of our culture. It will always be there. Take the lessons of old Remington. Know your people. Treat them well. One thing I forgot to mention is that, among other things, they just summarily fired people, closed up shop. Know one guy who we met, 30 years on the job at Remington, Tuesday, just a regular day, take your stuff, you're out. The settlement that, as I understand it, has not been reported. As many of you may know, Remington, during the pendency of this litigation, went essentially bankrupt not once, but twice. That's what happened after Cerberus got involved. A 200-year company in pretty short order, 2 bankruptcies. And we had nothing to do with that, which also tells you that maybe all this effort maybe there's a downside, maybe it doesn't make sense. They did it to themselves. And because they were bankrupt, we were limited in the amount of damages that could be recovered. But this case was never about damages from the point of view, damages is typically is what lawyers refer to, that's how they call money, compensation. But this case was never about damages in the sense of compensation. It was about damages in the sense of forcing change. It was about damages in the sense of realizing the goals of these families to do whatever they can to help prevent the next Sandy Hook. And if there's any message that you get after learning about all this is they don't care about it's money that gets their attention. It's money that gets any industry's attention, especially this industry that is so not used to parting with it, and especially those who underwrite the industry, like the insurance companies. So it was really important that they get damages, and it was really important that they get a lot of damages, because it has to be something that gets the attention of this industry, and it's in the insurance and banking industries. But that was limited because of the bankruptcy. The total amount of insurance available to these families was $73 million. That's what the insurance companies paid. They were looking at the same evidence we were. So the settlement is $73 million. That's all there was. That's all there was. You really have not had, you're really in a situation that is very unique when you experience something like somebody being told they're getting a certain amount of money, a lot of money, and having that hurt. These families, they would pay everything. They'd give it all back just for 1 minute. That would be true justice. But the other thing I just have to mention is that they would have told these insurance companies to pound sand if it was just them offering the money and trying to move on. From the beginning, it was not about money. It was about finding out, getting answers, learning about these decisions. And the linchpin of this settlement is that it allows these families the rights to share the information as to what they learned with the public. And so much is happening so quickly. You can imagine there are hundreds of thousands of documents. I would say stay tuned, but I mean, that's not what today is about. And I'm just going to finish up. It's really rare to do something as a lawyer in a law firm. Where's my lawyer? Where the public actually is like, oh, wow. Let's put it this way. You don't get a lot of love letters as a lawyer. And I think, we've heard, and when we filed this case, we heard from so many people of goodwill. Of course, we had the expected, people who weren't thrilled with the case. But we got so much an outpouring of support. And from doctors, from trauma surgeons who were just sick and tired of being devastated by seeing wounds that were battlefield wounds in children and young adults and teenagers and grandparents. And people wanted to send us money. Imagine somebody wanting to send a lawyer money. I've never heard of such a thing. You're doing something pretty good when that happens. And I just want to read a letter I got to you from somebody named Abigail from Minnesota. Abigail wrote, regarding Donna Soto et al. Versus Bushmaster Firearms, I read of your suit in the New York Times, and I'm enclosing a small check to be placed towards the attorney's fees. Thank you for taking this on. If we don't tilt at windmills, we will never topple them. This is important work, and the community of Newtown are not forgotten. And she sent a check for $25, which I actually haven't cashed, but if anybody has and I may have just lost, but here it is. You don't have to see it, just take my word for it. There's a check in here for $25. So this world has a lot more Abigails. There's a lot of Abigails out there. You may not hear from them, but they're out there. So now I'd turn it over to the families. Finally, okay, it's time to bring it to an end. And this is who you really need to listen to. I'm just so honored that they have the courage to get up here. Hannah Davino would like to say a few words about her sister Rachel.
Rachel was one of a kind. She always stood up for what was right. From a very young age, she faced adversity with grace. Rachel was... Picture. Thank you. Rachel was really beginning her life when she was murdered. She was taking fertility tests to make sure she didn't need to go to the doctor to have children. Her boyfriend was going to propose to her on Christmas, and she never got the chance to see her engagement ring, which was her grandmother's. And I will never forget walking into the funeral home and seeing her in her casket. We had an open casket funeral, and her friends worked tirelessly to make sure that we didn't see the remnants of what happened to her. But you could still tell with the veil on her head and the box on her chest and them hiding her right hand, her left hand, and putting her engagement ring on her right hand, that what she went through was brutal. The medical examiner could not be certain if she was shot 9 or 11 times due to ricochets and re-entry wounds. And this was only her second week of school at Sandy Hook School. This should not have happened, and it should not happen to anybody else. Thank you.
This is a picture of Rachel, and we still feel her spirit, but every single day we miss who Rachel would be.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'd like to preface my statement by saying that my heart goes out to the parents of the Parkland victims. They marked a terrible anniversary yesterday, 4 years. I thought December 14th, 2012 would be just an ordinary day in a string of ordinary days. But my little boy, Noah, never came home from school that day. I invite you all to imagine, one moment we had this dazzling, energetic 6-year-old little boy, and the next, all we had left were echoes of the past, photographs of a lost child who will never grow older, calendars marking a horrifying new anniversary, and a lonely grave and pieces of Noah's life now stored in boxes and in his school backpack. Every day is a realization that he should be here, yet he's not. Those of you who have never lost a child don't want to imagine, and those who have know what I mean. What is lost remains lost forever. Today marks an inflection point when our duty of care to our children as a society finally supersedes the bottom line of an industry that made such an atrocity as Sandy Hook possible to begin with. Today is a day of accountability for an industry that has thus far enjoyed operating with immunity and impunity. And for this, I am grateful. Thank you.
A little over 9 years ago, I saw my two children get onto a school bus. Just another normal Friday at the start of a busy holiday season. I was excited to see my youngest, Dylan, later that afternoon, knowing I'd be going to his classroom to make gingerbread houses. We never made a gingerbread house, and Dylan never came home. The next time I saw him was in his casket, where I was able to hold his hands but not touch his body, which had been shot 5 times, killing him instantly in his first grade classroom. We moved our family from England to America because of our belief in the American dream, the land of possibilities, where a brighter future was achievable for our children and where Dylan could receive the best support for his autism. Less than 2 years after moving to Newtown, our dream turned into the American nightmare, where for too many, the right to bear arms is a higher priority than the right to life. Our nightmare is the same as that of far too many families who have suffered death by firearms. Our hope to create change is also shared by those families. Nobody wants to experience what we live with every day. After Dylan's murder, I made a very early promise to do everything in my power to honor his short life by creating change that would save the lives of other children and prevent mass shootings like the one that destroyed our family. This lawsuit has been part of that promise. When we first started speaking to different law firms about our ideas, we kept hearing it was impossible, an unwinnable case, that firearm manufacturers were immune, untouchable, and that though they expressed their deepest sympathies for our loss, there was nothing they could do. Josh Koskoff and his firm were different. The only ones that believed in the art of the possible, or maybe didn't realize what they were stepping into. It was that one. It was that one. I'm trying to do you a good one here, Josh. But they believed there was a way to crack the gun industry's impenetrable armor. And I'm grateful for the other law firms that also stepped up to support this case in so many ways. For 8 long years, we've continued our fight to hold Remington accountable for its role in prioritizing profit above safety and using reckless marketing techniques to appeal to at-risk and violence-prone young men. Marketing that is targeted those that want to appear more intimidating, more powerful, and more masculine through the use of their AR-15. The thousands of internal documents obtained in discovery for this paint a picture of a company that lost its way, choosing more aggressive marketing campaigns for profit with no thought to the impact on their intended target user, and we can't wait to share those documents. The Sandy Hook shooter chose the AR-15 for his massacre because of its ability to inflict the most lethal damage in the shortest amount of time. It's not a useful weapon for hunting or for self-defense. It was designed to kill quickly and efficiently. The Sandy Hook shooter helped fulfill that purpose, shooting 154 bullets in less than 5 minutes and killing 26 innocent people, including my 6-year-old son. The gun industry has been shielded from being held accountable for their part in these tragedies. Today, that changes. Gun manufacturing will continue. People will still purchase firearms, and I hope they continue to use these weapons safely and responsibly. But this victory, this landmark historic victory, sends a forceful and compelling message to manufacturers and to the insurance and banking industries that support them. This is a high-risk market. It is not profitable, and you will be held accountable. Nothing will bring Dylan back. The closest I get to him now is by kissing his urn every night, telling him I love him and I miss him. But I made him a promise, and I'll keep working to deliver that promise for the rest of my life. My hope for this lawsuit is that by facing and finally being penalized for the impact of their work, gun companies, along with the insurance and banking industries that enable them, will be forced to make their practices safer than they've ever been, which will save lives and stop more shootings. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Bill Sherlock. My wife Mary was the school psychologist, as we talked about earlier. And after 36 years and 3 days, we hugged and kissed, and I went to work, and that was it. At the beginning of this whole process, I really felt like Don Quixote de la Mancha. We didn't know what to go after or how to go after it, but we knew we needed to concentrate on two distinct areas. One was the marketing campaigns, which we found out and we saw a little bit of today, and we will see more, as to how egregious and amoral they were in their practices. That's one of the main reasons why there's now a crack in the foundation of PLACA, which leads us to the second part of the equation, and that is it's going to cost a lot more money these days if you're a gun manufacturer. The days of easy premiums with no claims is over. And much like, everybody has kids, they all rack up a car every once in a while. What happens? Your premiums go up. They go up even if you have a clean record. I got down to one person and 3 cars, and I was like, how come my insurance rates don't come down? I can't drive 3 cars at one time. And they're like, that's just the way it is. Well, that's changed now for anyone in the gun industry. Like many of the people up here, my experience with guns prior to Sandy Hook was minimal. I grew up in the country. I knew people had guns because they hunted. And I started to think about that. In order to hunt and make it sporting, there's restrictions. You can use a shotgun, but you can't use a rifle. There's a restriction on the ammunition. Oh, and by the way, you have to take a safety course because you have to get a license in order to hunt. Okay, that gives Bambi a sporting chance. You go in and you buy one of these weapons, and if you're at a federal place, yeah, you have to go through a background check. Some of them can be pretty quick, but for the most part, in many cases, you walk out with the gun. You're all set to go. Well, hold on a second. Here's the ammunition you want for this, and this is the key to this. As opposed to a handgun, the ammunition that goes into one of these killing machines it's lighter, but it travels 3 times as fast as a handgun bullet. When that bullet hits a body, it cavitates, it spins, it creates a vacuum. Any organs that are near it explode as a result of that vacuum. It hits the femur, and whereas a regular bullet basically would stop at the femur, this bullet will take out the femur, shatter it, and anything that's close to it. So be advised if you're in this business, and again, we've tilted at windmills here, and I could never tell you I thought I'd see this day. And it's not going to bring Mary back. It's not going to bring any of these kids back. But the cost of business is going to go up substantially. And you will be held accountable in many of your practices. And for Josh and his firm, I can't tell you how impressed I am with each and every individual one of them through this whole process. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Matthew Soto, and when I was 15, my sister Vicky was murdered in her first grade classroom. We've heard stories that she was a phenomenal first grade teacher who, the morning of December 14th, was getting ready to make gingerbread houses with her first grade students. Many parents were on their way in to help make these gingerbread houses with their children for the holiday spirit. We have spent countless holidays, family parties, birthdays without Vicky, missing Vicky, because of what happened on December 14th. We launched this lawsuit for accountability. We wanted to know just how pervasive the advertisements from these gun manufacturers went, and the things that we found were horrific. The gun manufacturers knew that they were advertising a dangerous product, and they exploited these dangers. Simply put, they prioritized their profits over the safety of Americans. Whether it was telling men that they needed a man card or making sure their weapons appeared in the latest first-person shooters, they did everything that they could for these guns to be in front of everyone. When things were not going well, the industry tried to rebrand the name that was associated with the slaughter of countless Americans by changing it from the AR-15 to the modern sporting rifle, a slap in the face to all victims who have been previously killed with the same exact weapon. Although Vicki is gone, her legacy lives on through the foundation we created in her memory, and through efforts like this that ensure that no family will have to go through what we had to go through. We hope this lawsuit sends a message to gun manufacturers, insurance companies, and the banks that support them that you can be held liable for these products that you are selling. We hope that our lawsuit sends a message to the gun industry that they are not untouchable and that our lawsuit is just the start of things. Thank you.
As we continue to listen to these devastating testimonies from families, we are going to take a quick 2-minute break here for some of you. You are watching Live Now from Fox.
Today's announcement is not about honoring our son Benjamin. We honor Ben in many ways. We tell stories about him, about how he wanted to be an architect, how he loved lighthouses, and had an energy that could make the house sound like a room full of people, and how he loved his big brother, his grandparents, his cousins, his aunts and uncles, and his friends. We also honor Ben through our own creativity, our writing, our music, our speaking, our foundation, Ben's Lighthouse, and the way we live our lives. But today is not about honoring Ben. Today is about how and why he died. Today is about what is right and what is wrong. Today is about the last 5 minutes of his life, which were tragic, traumatic, and the worst thing that can happen to a child, and how they unfolded as they did. Our legal system has given us some justice today, but as I told Josh Koskoff a few weeks ago, David and I will never have true justice. True justice would be our 15-year-old, healthy and standing next to us right now. But Benny will never be 15. He will be 6 forever because he is gone forever. Today is about what is right and what is wrong. Thank you.
We're standing here because Ben isn't. He'd be tall, probably with tousled brown hair, and probably lanky, probably skinny. But as Francine said, he's 6. He's 6 forever, under a granite stone in Newtown Cemetery. When you lose a kid at an age like that, 6 years is not enough time to take all the photographs and videos that you need to last for the rest of your life. One of the reasons Ben's not here is because some people made a decision, driven by an increased desire for profits and a fear of a shrinking market share, to focus their advertising on young men, to sell them their product, the most intentionally lethal consumer product our species has ever devised. Think about this for a second. Does Honda market their incredibly powerful open-wheel Formula One race cars to young drivers, inexperienced drivers, and tell them that if they buy the product, they'll be able to dominate the public roads and highways? Do they do that? Do the makers of hunting knives and compound bows imply in their advertising to young hunters that they can turn those weapons on other human beings and that buying them and using them will bring them power and glory? No. But that's what the firearms industry did. They behaved irresponsibly to make more money, and their corporate partners turned the other cheek. Today is an example of our system working. An example of the process that, while lengthy, it makes it clear to the manufacturers of these products that if you want to sell them, you must do it in a reasonable and responsible way. And it makes clear to the banks who fund them and the insurance companies that cover them that there will be a steep price for irresponsible behavior. Our son Ben didn't behave irresponsibly on December 14th. He went to school. And now he's gone. And we're here because we want to make sure that another father and another mother don't have to stand here Sunday. Thank you.